Stephanie Burton sat across from Evelyn Page in a pleasant conference room with good ventilation and lighting, although the lighting was from LEDs rather than natural sunlight because there were no windows in the room. Stephanie smiled and said, "I want you to write down your most significant sexual experience in the last 10 years. Try not to miss anything." "Why do you need this?" asked Evelyn. "Because this is an important step in achieving your goals. The goals we talked about yesterday," Stephanie answered. "Here's some paper and a pen. We're not in the Middle Ages. Can I use the computer?" "Trust my experience when I say that using pen and paper will be more effective in achieving your goals, Evelyn." Taking the paper and looking at the pen, Evelyn replied, "Do I have to write on this form? I would have preferred some plain-lined paper. And this pen has an engraving. I would have preferred a regular one." Stephanie smiled. "Sorry, but this is the only paper we have. Here we will find another pen." Stephanie rummaged through her purse, pulled out a nearly new $45 Schiefer Prelude ballpoint pen, and handed it to Evelyn with a smile. "Will this work?" Evelyn smiled. "This is more suitable. I love the cobalt blue and gold colors and the scribbles on the letterhead. They move so smoothly across the page. Maybe I'll just keep it for myself." She smiled again. "We'll see," Stephanie laughed. "Just get to work. I'll ask my assistant Beth to accompany you and bring you some drinks, or a snack if you like. I hope 3 hours will be enough for you." "No problem," Evelyn replied. "Please ask Beth to bring Pepsi Zero if available." "Okay," Stephanie replied, pressed her thumb on the little screen on the wall next to the door, and then walked out. As soon as the door closed, Evelyn began to write, barely looking up when Beth brought Pepsi Zero, sat down opposite Evelyn, and began reading some trashy magazine. Evelyn's handwriting was very neat and easy to read. It was December 2014. I was sitting alone at a table in the bar of the Hyatt Hotel with a glass in my left hand, admiring, as always, a large, emerald-cut diamond with ruby wedding band baguettes and a platinum ring on the ring finger of my left hand. I didn't particularly like Des Moines, but I had a good reason to be there. I hoped my skirt wasn't too short to attract unwanted attention. It didn't look too short when I got dressed for the evening. I considered just staying in my hotel room a block away and watching TV, but I had been working a lot that day and needed some release without having to call a taxi or rent a car. I was minding my own business when a decent-looking guy approached me with a noticeable gold ring on the ring finger of his left hand. "Hello, I'm Charles. I'm just traveling, leaving tomorrow to go back to New York. I've had a rough day and would appreciate some good conversation to unwind. Do you mind if I sit with you?" "I think not, if you're just looking for a conversation," I smiled, turning my left hand so that he couldn't miss my rings. He was a good conversationalist. However, he was a little obvious in his politeness when offering me a drink. He probably didn't know that under the table, within my reach, there was a potted philodendron in which I pour most of my drinks. I hoped it wouldn't kill the plant. It was nice and green, but that was up to Charles. If the drinks he bought for me were doubles, and there were many, I fear the poor dendron was doomed. I really hoped Charles wasn't a plant killer. That would have made me angry. I was sorry to hear that Charles's wife doesn't understand him. After about an hour of conversation, Charles changed tactics. He started complimenting me on my appearance, not my personality or intelligence or any of my other deep characteristics, but my appearance. How superficial of him. I mean, I look really good. I have big breasts, a beautiful face that doesn't need makeup to shine, a round ass and sculpted legs. But what trivial compliments they were for a man who seemed to pride himself on his ability to hold an intelligent conversation. I sighed as he took my hand, even touched my wedding ring, and suggested we retire to his Hyatt room, I think it was room 439, for a private drink. I hoped he would get over it, but he proposed, and I was alarmed because I felt the need to accompany him. We went to his room, but I insisted on going separately. "How do I know that you will come up to my room in 10 minutes?" he asked with a grin. "Here is my wedding ring," I said, taking it off my finger and giving it to him. You'll put it back on when I come." He liked it very much, and he headed towards the elevator with a springy gait. When I reached room 439, Charles's grin became even more dramatic. I demanded that he return the ring to me before we had any contact. He kindly did so. When Charles clumsily removed my top, it was clear that he was very worried about not having a bra. He also seemed pleased that when I took off my skirt, I wasn't wearing any panties. After he collapsed on the bed exhausted, I stood up, went to my large bag, and soon after that I experienced a very strong orgasm. He didn't say anything when I left. It was a little disappointing. I was surprised by the noise in front of the Hyatt Hotel when my taxi passed by it from my hotel on the way to the airport at about 10 a.m. the next day. I never asked why police cars were almost blocking the road in front of the Hyatt Hotel. In the second story, Evelyn wrote even more sweepingly. It was April 2016. I was sitting alone at a table in the bar of the Marriott North Hotel with a glass in my left hand, admiring, as always, a large emerald-cut diamond with ruby wedding band baguettes and a platinum ring on the ring finger of my left hand. I don't particularly like Cincinnati, but I had a good reason to be there. I hoped my skirt wasn't too short to attract unwanted attention. It didn't look too short when I got dressed for the evening. I considered just staying in my room at a nearby hotel and watching TV, but I had been working a lot that day and needed some time off. Half a dozen guys approached me, but they were put off when I made sure to show off my prominent rings on my left ring finger. However, Devin, who had discreetly placed his ring from his left hand into his trouser pocket before approaching me, was not bothered by what happened to the others. He used a line straight from the internet's top 40 pickup lines. "Your license was suspended for driving all the guys who came near you crazy?" "What do you mean?" I answered shyly. "I saw you shoot down 6 guys who came up to you." "This must mean a license suspension." He chuckled, clearly proud of his wit. When I didn't tell him to get out, even though I had put my rings out there for everyone to see again, he continued, "My name is Devin. What are you doing in Cincinnati?" "You don't look like a local," he said, sitting down at my table without an invitation. Unlike Charles, Devin didn't try to buy me a drink. He was either more confident or more economical, perhaps both. It didn't take him as long as Charles to propose to me. When he invited me to his hotel room for a drink, he specifically noted that it was a luxury suite. He tried so hard that I decided to meet him halfway. Just like with Charles, I sent him to his room with my wedding ring and followed him 10 minutes later. When I walked in, he smiled and put a wedding ring on my left ring finger. Devin was very gentle as he undressed me. He was also very complimentary of the size and shape of my buttocks. He was able to skillfully sit me on all fours on the double bed. Devin must have expended a lot of energy because he immediately plopped down on the bed next to me. I smiled at him, stood up, walked over to my large bag, and soon after that, I experienced a very strong orgasm that made my knees go weak. When I left, he wasn't raving about how much fun we had, but the smile on his face told me he had a great time. When I got home the next day and went online, there was a photo of the front of the Cincinnati Marriott North Hotel and a 5-paragraph article about the incident at the hotel. Evelyn wrote other very similar stories about Miami in January 2017, Atlanta in March 2018, New Orleans in February 2019, St. Paul in March 2020, Chicago in June 2021, and finally in Philadelphia in July 2022. By the time Evelyn finished writing about her 8 unforgettable sexual experiences, Beth had read her entire journal and was eager to get out of it. Evelyn put down her pen, smiled at Beth, and said, "Everything is ready." Beth smiled back, thinking, just in time, and took out her cell phone and called Stephanie. 5 minutes later, Stephanie entered the room, skimmed through the 8 stories spanning 16 pages, smiled and asked, "Would you like to have dinner with me and Professor Stallman, Evelyn?" "That would be great," Evelyn replied. At dinner, neither Stephanie nor the professor asked Evelyn about her stories, although they did inquire about her passion for engagement rings and her views on extramarital affairs. As they parted, Stephanie said, "Perhaps we can meet tomorrow in the main conference room to talk about your stories, Evelyn?" "Very good," Evelyn replied. The next morning, in the main conference room with large picture windows overlooking the manicured Green Acres lawn, Evelyn sat opposite Stephanie, Professor Stallman, Dr. Pingree, and Drs. Madison, and Attorney Walker stood to the side, out of Evelyn's line of sight, unless she turned her head 90 degrees. After some preliminary remarks, Dr. Stephanie Burton began the discussion. "I noticed that in your stories it is unclear exactly how you achieved your second orgasm after getting out of bed and taking out your bag. What caused the second orgasm?" asked Dr. Burton. Evelyn turned her head and looked at Lawyer Walker. There was no expression on his face, and he did not give any signal to Evelyn. "Okay. I guess I didn't want to write this down." "Are you ashamed of this?" Stephanie insisted. "No. They cheated on their wives, and with a married woman." "I'm certainly not ashamed," Evelyn snapped. "And yet you didn't write about it. Again, I ask, why is this, Evelyn?" Evelyn just fidgeted and didn't seem like she was going to answer. So Stephanie continued, "Because you applied to hit them 10-inch with a knife blade piercing their chests right into their hearts." At this statement, Evelyn fidgeted in her chair, closed her eyes, and seemed to lower her hands. Stephanie screamed, "Evelyn, stop it!" and hit the table with her fist. Evelyn put her hands back on the table, stared at Stephanie, sighed, and then said, "Yes, it was a real thrill." The professor and the other doctors raised their eyebrows and scribbled notes on the notepads in front of them. The interview continued for another half hour before Evelyn returned to her room at Green Acres. A week after the interview, Dr. Stephanie Burton, holding a report signed not only by herself, but also by Professor Stallman, Dr. Pingree, and Dr. Madison, sat in Judge Harlow's office with the district attorney, Evelyn's attorney Walker, and a court reporter. After a brief discussion, Judge Harlow asked, "So, what is your psychological report on Evelyn Page?" "Yes, Your Honor, here it is. The unanimous opinion of the court-appointed professor and 3 psychologists, Dr. Pingree, representing the defense, Dr. Madison, representing the DA's office, and mine, is that she is insane." The situation was discussed for the next 45 minutes, after which Judge Harlow said, "Well, it's nice to come to an agreement. Both the defense and prosecution agree that Mrs. Page will be committed to a mental institution for the rest of her natural life, unless an evaluation by 5 psychologists after 10 years in a mental institution is unanimous that she no longer poses a threat to society. Do you agree?" After the district attorney and defense attorney agreed, Stephanie spoke again. "One condition must be made, Your Honor. She should never again have rings on her fingers or in her possession at all." 2 days later, the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a front-page story, "Serial Killer Evelyn Page Trapped in Mental Asylum." One of the key paragraphs in the article read, "Although actual statistics are difficult to obtain from interviews with married male residents, it appears that the number of cheaters in Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Des Moines, and the 5 other cities where Evelyn plied her trade has dropped significantly since 2015 of the year. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.